I would like to introduce you to our didactic presenter today, Dr. Kathy Leckman. Dr. Leckman serves as the Assistant Dean for Faculty and Staff Affairs in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at Ohio State. Dr. Leckman earned her PhD in 2015 from the College of Education and Human Ecology. She has a Master's of Arts degree in Conflict Resolution from the McGregor School of Antioch University and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Sociology from the College of Worcester. Kathy has been with OSU since 2001 when she started her career with OSU Extension as a leader in diversity development. During her time in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, she developed numerous professional development opportunities for faculty, staff, and students. Throughout her tenure at the university, Kathy also has served several other leadership positions, including serving as the Associate Dean of the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, serving as the Interim Executive Director of the Kirwan Institute, and as Interim Associate Director of the Center of Hope for Higher Education Enterprise in 2017. Kathy has also worked for the Cleveland Municipal School District, the Ohio Department of Youth Services, and the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction before coming to OSU. Such a wonderful resume. And we are so excited to learn from you, Dr. Leckman.
Well, thank you. And it's great to be here. And I'm going to jump right in because I know we have 20 minutes. And just FYI, I set a timer. And so I just will go over our learning objectives to describe the core differences in work styles, communication preferences, and expectations among active workplace generations. And then to identify strategies to leverage generational differences as a source of collaboration and innovation rather than conflict. And since I have a master's in conflict resolution, the concept of conflict is actually not negative. It's how we deal with the conflicts that arise that is important. But I'm going to jump right in. I really like quotes, and so I put them in intermittently. But so the era when you were born has a substantial influence on your behaviors, attitudes, values, and personality traits. And so when we think about generations, and a lot of it is we think about different behaviors. One caveat I do want to say, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we're presenting kind of like the bell curve, and we're presenting research observations, but I don't want us to get into stereotypes and make too many generalizations. So I'll kind of keep reminding us of that as we dive into what the generations are. So the generations, we're going to start with the silent and traditionalists. There may be a few of these folks in your workplace, but they are really kind of up there in age if they are. Followed by the baby boomers, which we hear a lot about. They're kind of in the way, starting to transition out with retirement, but you can see the age range and then the years. A caveat to note is that depending on which researcher you use, these years can be plus or minus approximately 5 years. Gen X, age range 60 to 45. Millennials, age range 44 to 29. Gen Z, age range 13 to 28, so they would be really the newbies in our workforce. And then the next generation after Gen Z are called Generation Alpha or Polars, and they are not quite ready for the workforce, but just wanted you all to be aware of them. For people who like graphic and images, you can see the breakdown of the years and the different generations. One thing of note is that since 2015, the majority of the workforce are now millennials. So that is a big shift, particularly from where the boomers tended to dominate workplaces. Here's an image of just the breakdown. So we can see 2% of the workforce are the traditionalists or the silent generation. 25% are baby boomers. Then we have Gen Xers at 33%, millennials at 35%. And then Gen Z at 5%. So those folks are going to be climbing up there. One of the things that is of note, and you might see this in your organizations, with our newer generations, they say this about every generation, it was among the most diverse. So this is just a breakdown of the percent of the population of each generation, and then the racial and ethnic demographics of that population. So you can see that, as we go toward the newer generations, they become increasingly diverse, which can impact our workplaces and what they look like. And you can also see there what the percent of the population is. I'm not going to read the chart to you. So we're going to start with Gen X and talk a little bit about Gen X as a whole, Gen X in the workplace, some of the basic characteristics and traits. They are known to be smart, and I'm not saying that because I'm a Gen X. That was something that was in the literature. Resourceful, pragmatic, skeptical. The first generation to be concerned with work-life balance, and not the concept of living to work, but we work in order so that we can live. We have an interest in lifelong learning, particularly when we're in the workplace. We tend to be very autonomous, come across as very confident, want to know what managers want quickly. There's no need to beat around the bush when it comes to working with Gen X folks. And when it comes down to communication, email is preferred, and it says phone, but I'm going to challenge that phone because personally, don't call me. If I don't recognize the number, I'm not answering. Send me an email. You can text me, but I'm one of those people that's constantly, I'm on my email. Sadly, I even check it after hours, which that's a whole nother thing. But again, the concept of autonomous, I want to talk a little bit about some of these characteristics. One of the things about Gen X is that we were known as the first latchkey kids, meaning there were not a lot of after-school programs like there are now. So a lot of times after school, we were left to our own devices. And so when we get to this autonomous and this kind of sense of independence, the research talks about a lot of time that's where that comes from. We also tend to prefer concise and to the point communication. No need for long, flowery soliloquies or anything like that. When it comes to the workplace, we prefer constructive feedback and, again, timely feedback. We may challenge the status quo. One of the things that Gen X is known for also is, I don't want to say authority problems, but questioning authority, let's say. Again, personal feedback at regular intervals is helpful in the workplace, but also having the sense of freedom and how they approach their work. Gen X is not a generation that needs to be micromanaged. They don't need to be told exactly what to do. It's like, here's the end, here's what we want, you figure out how to get it done as long as we get what we need at the end of the project. Gen Xers like to be rewarded for independent thinking. And one of the other things is that, for Gen X, especially in the workplace, they must see leaders as credible, and appreciate explanation about decisions. One of the things that when I've been interviewing, I haven't interviewed recently, but when I had interviewed, it's like I told the people, it's like, I ask a lot of questions, not because I'm challenging your authority, but because I like to understand the big picture. We also tend to not be intimidated by authority. It doesn't necessarily mean that we don't respect it, but we lived through a lot of different things. And one of the things that's different about Gen X versus like the boomer generation and the silents and traditionalists when they were in the workforce is that there was this concept of company loyalty. Well, Gen X is found not to be as loyal to the company or the organization, but do develop loyalties to people. So going into the millennials want to make an impact. Millennials enjoy teamwork, need open and frequent communication. They want to be listened to and cared for. And if you think about the parenting strategies that millennials grew up with, that Gen X parents implemented, maybe because we didn't necessarily get them, it's kind of like making the child the center. Self-esteem was a big concept for millennials growing up and making sure the kids had healthy self-esteem. This group is likely to engage in and support social activism. And also, this generation is more accustomed to diversity, because if you go back to that, that the data that I showed, it shows you how they had exposure to more diverse populations than we even did as Gen X. They're more socially tolerant than previous generations. They want meaningful jobs that goes to like wanting to make an impact. They don't want to just earn money. Money is nice, but they want to be contributing while they're earning. Wanting to be part of decision making. They're okay with taking risks and making mistakes. And they're the first generation of digital natives. So basically, my joke is when I do some of these sessions, I talk about I went to undergrad with a Smith Corona typewriter, and that was really cool because it had the correction ribbon, so you didn't just need to use the whiteout. But I left with a Mac computer. So in the 4 years that I was there, we transitioned from, you know, at that time, technology was the typewriter, but then we transitioned to the computer. So again, this generation grew up with computers. They learned computing, computer in school. They instead of typing, they took keyboarding. So that concept is important. They're also one of the first high social media users. The different platforms. I mean, MySpace, which didn't survive, but Facebook started with this generation. There was something called Friendster. To share music, we had Napster. Of course, that was all then done away with because it wasn't really legal. People were not getting their royalties. One of the other things that was important that started with this generation is mental health awareness. And again, it's not that earlier generations didn't have mental health struggles or issues, but there was such a stigma associated with talking about it. For this generation, they started to break that stigma. And having awareness, particularly in the workplace, became very relevant and important. When we think about millennials at work, needing explicit direction and prompt feedback. So that's one of the differences between millennials and Gen X's is that, while the Gen X's want to just be told what the end result needs to be and, we figure out how to get there, millennials are looking for more direction. But also the feedback is still important. So there are some common themes when we think about the different generations. Technologically literate and will often multitask. They want, again, meaningful projects. And this one I kind of laughed at. It says they prefer modern equipment, but at this rate, who doesn't prefer modern equipment? So I'm not sure that's just a millennial thing. The rewards must be specific and immediate for millennials. And again, if you kind of think about the concept of millennials, that was also the generation of the concept of participation trophies, where everybody got an award, whether you won or lost. And people can argue about what that meant or how that translates to today and at work. But immediate awards, the concept of fast food, drive-throughs became more popular. Wanting to have opinions valued, prefer text messages and emails instead of phone calls. And I would challenge this to say they don't even want emails, that this generation prefers text messages. And more informal communication. Here at OSU, we have the Teams platform and the instant messaging. And so it's interesting because last night at 8 o'clock, I saw a Teams message that I missed because I was glued to my email. So again, more informal communication, kind of communication here in the moment. They also are interested in a work-life balance. Again, Gen X's might have started that, but the millennials picked up on that and have carried that forward as something that again, they don't live to work. They work so that they can live and do and enjoy things. And then the concept of workplace flexibility is important when we're talking about millennials. They also value transparency in not just communication, but in management and leadership. They do well with inclusive management styles. So again, not necessarily micromanaging, giving explicit direction and maybe providing steps, but also letting them have input as to, if there's projects, there's different ways that we can manage. Information flow, the concept of free flowing vertically and horizontally. So not just concentrating it at one layer and expecting it to trickle down. We want to interact, or they want to interact with as many people as possible. And then respect hierarchy a little bit less than other generations. I think, and Gen X is included in this, but I think definitely the silence and the boomers, there was a concept of paying your dues. And you work through the ranks to get promoted. This generation looks at things a little differently. It's not about, focusing on, well, I'm going to start here and I'm going to work my way up. It's like, well, I graduated with this degree, so I want to start here at this level. And some people say that's not a realistic thing. But again, it's just helping us understand how people are thinking when they're coming into our places. And then authentic and available leaders. That's something that is important to millennials in the workplace. Our Gen Z folks, very technology driven. The millennials were digital natives. Gen Z is even more. I mean, young people, it's funny because I know people who have grandchildren, and if they get a new cell phone, they give it to the grandkid. The grandkid might be 10 years old, but to help them set it up because technology is so integral. They have never known life without cell phones. They might never have had a landline in their homes. So technology, computers, you ask Google for everything. This generation also tends to experience life through social media. One of the things that I kind of laugh about is, a lot of the generations are on social media, including the boomers and even some of the silent generation have Facebook accounts. But when you talk to the younger people, like when I talk to my millennial friends or people I work with that are Gen Z, it's about Snapchat. That is how you communicate. You communicate via Snapchat, Twitter/X, things that, even when I work with students here, they don't want emails. They don't even want text messages. They want things through social media. They want stuff on Snapchat. They want stuff on Instagram. They are self-confident, Gen Z, believe that work should make them happy, will leave if work makes them unhappy. This is also one of the generations, this and millennials started the concept of the gig economy, whereas baby boomers and even some of Gen X tend to be more security oriented. Millennials and Gen Z saw that security is a false concept because people were downsized, people lost their jobs, they saw their parents lose their jobs. We had the great recessions. And so, again, if job doesn't make me happy, I'm going to be moving on. They would like to change the world through their work. They tend to be innovative and creative in a team environment. There's a definitely connection to personal devices. I was talking, well, this professor I was talking to was a millennial. It was really funny because he's a new professor. He's going up for fourth year review, but when he started, I mean, he was fresh out of his PhD program. I'm not that old, but I really thought, I'm like, oh my God, he just looks so young. He could have been one of an undergraduate student, but he was connected to his phone. We're having a conversation and he's checking his phone and it was like stressing me out. So we have this connection to personal devices, and it's not necessarily a flaw because at work, we almost make it so you need to have your personal device. We have the dual authentication process where you get a message on your phone and it says, yes, it's me. We have smartwatches that let us know when we get an email, or when we get a text message. They appear to have short attention spans. And I said appear because that's one of the critiques of Gen Z is that, because of things like TikTok, when it started out, it was like 30-second snippets. They've since increased that. But again, TikTok is another big thing. Extensive use of internet to check facts. They also value flexibility, transparency, and personal freedom. And they want to do the job as they see fit. They value organizations that listen to their ideas and they want their opinions respected and they want people to value their contributions. Age, rank, or position is not necessarily important to this group. Again, they prefer social media to communicate. And it's very interesting because when I work with students, I try to talk to them about workplace culture. And in the workplace, your boss is not going to Snapchat you. So there's going to have to be some give and take when it comes to the world of work. Appreciate salary and advancement opportunities. I think that's interesting because I think that's not necessarily a generational thing. I think most of us appreciate that. But they also tend to need mentoring and feedback at work. This generation sometimes comes in thinking that they know more because they have been exposed to a lot and the internet is at their fingertip. You can get information, downloaded on your phone. but they also don't necessarily have the life experience. They're are aware of the emotional tone of the workplace and desire a positive and collaborative work environment. They want a boss who appears warm and willing to listen. That goes back to that, wanting everybody deserves a trophy. I'm going to start going through this stuff real quick because you all have these slides. But again, mental health, work-life balance. I'm going to quickly cover boomers, clarity in roles, clear expectations, regular feedback, a variety of tasks. Remote work and flexibility is not as much of a priority as other generations. They prefer face-to-face interaction and communication. There's the separation of personal and professional. They do well in hierarchical structures, respect seniority and the position of people, prefer experience-based leadership, the concept of a strong work ethic. The communication, I'm going to kind of skip over. Millennials and Gen Zs do not hesitate to speak up when they are offended by something, often by reporting what was said to an authority figure rather than having direct conversation, which is something different. This is a different version of a lot of what I talked about, so I am going to actually skip this and go to managing all four generations. What you talked about this, avoiding generational stereotypes and assumptions, recognizing all employees as individuals who have unique and valuable skill sets, create a plan to promote multi-generational knowledge sharing across teams and workplaces. There's something called reverse mentoring. Okay, so one of the things that you can do is discuss different generations, have employees identify their core values, ask people what they need, be flexible, and use the strengths of employees, and be open to different thoughts and opinions. One important thing, and then I'm going to stop, employees should be held to the same standards. And one of the things that you can do to help avoid generational conflict is share your workplace culture and what the workplace expectations are and be explicit about it. All right, and the beauty of collaboration between older and younger generations is that we combine strength with wisdom. So we started with a quote, we end with a quote.